topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf.
Hey, welcome, Googlization Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Talk4 TV, and I appreciate you being here. We've got, I have a few great guests today. If you've been watching the headlines, if you are in business, if you are in a worker and you're looking for another job, you've probably recognized that we are experiencing a labor shortage. I wrote about this 20 years ago. McKinsery wrote about it 30 years ago and talked about the talent war, the war for talent. I started to talk and write about it in about 1999, I believe, and then I published my first book in the early 2000s about the perfect labor storm. And it was really more than just at that point the millennials, but it was about the convergence of the generations, globalization, the internet, women in the workplace, changes in education, technology. It was the convergence of all these things, which eventually evolved into Googlization. So I know I get a lot of questions about what is Googlization, and Googlization is really the convergence of the wired, the tired, and technology, or business people and technology, which we all experienced in 2020. So one of those headlines that we've been experiencing lately, or that we've been reading about lately, is businesses are really struggling to find jobs. This is not just a blip on the radar. This is not going to resolve by the end of the year. Just this morning, a couple of headlines that I pulled out, and we'll be talking a little bit about that today with our guests. The labor, after a pause in 2022, so this is from the Conference Board. The expectation is that labor shortages, too few people applying for too many jobs, will increase through the end of this year, and then in early 2022, it will improve. It will stabilize a little bit, but then it's going to accelerate again until the next recession. So which is typically in cycles, 5 to 7 years type thing. And I'm not an economist, so you can follow your favorite economist for that information. But we are going to continue to experience a very, very, very tight labor market. People, you got to get your act together. And that's why we're here at Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We talk about that every week. What can you do to help attract talent? There was another report that came out, Wall Street Journal, and I don't remember where the study was from, but they reported on it, that there are now more job openings than there are qualified people to fill them. National Federation of Independent Businesses found that 92% of small businesses report that they are getting few or no qualified applicants. Again, so big challenge. But part of the transformation, and also an opportunity that's out there, is that the hybrid workforce is with us, and where 99%, and we'll get into this with our first guest in just a minute, but prior to the pandemic, 99% of companies required employees to be at work 80% or more of the time. That number now has been reduced to about 10%, require their employees to be at work, not working, but at work more than 99% or more than 80% of the time. So big shift, and that has huge implications. not only for recruitment, but for retention, for engagement, for diversity, inclusion, you name it. And companies are still trying to figure it out. So our first guest today is going to be Victoria Pelletier. She is a vice president, an IBM vice president of talent. Talent and transformation leader, if I got that right, vice president and North American talent and transformation leader. And then our second guest we're going to follow up with is Kia Roberts. She's the founder and principal of Triangle Investigations. We're going to talk about some of the compliance issues and some misconduct that it needs to be addressed, and that can be anywhere from discrimination to sexual harassment to bullying. Now that it doesn't go away just because we're working remote. And Kia, if I didn't say this, was the former NFL director of investigations. So we've got two really phenomenal guests. Before we get there, if Roxy can show you, there's a number of webinars that relate to this. I spoke with Ed Gordon last week. And Ed, if you're not familiar with him, he's been a labor economist who wrote over 20 books. And the website, the interview is available on YouTube. You can watch it there. I also have two webinars that are available. One is your duct tape won't fix your effed up candidate experience, which is a real critical part. And then also we're talking about adaptability, how we need to change. And we're living in a world of digital transformation. And you can access those replays on the links that Roxy just displayed. And we'll show that again throughout. But right now, I want to also thank Ingomo, who just last week launched their new app. So I appreciate Ingomo being one of our sponsors, and of course, Success Performance Solutions, which you'll hear from both of them in just a few minutes at the break. But right now, let's bring on Victoria Pelletier. As I said, she's the IBM Vice President and North American Talent and Transformation Leader. That's a big title. You must have that on your door, the whole tag, right?
Yeah. No, I've decided to cut that down. We've got acronyms galore at IBM, so I just use that. I tend to just sign off my emails just VP, both my initials and my title.
VP. Right? Yeah, easy to remember. Well, welcome. Thanks. It's great to meet. We did it digitally over the week, getting to know each other. But appreciate to be here. And I reached out to you about the hybrid workforce. Certainly, IBM just studying the future of work. They've been all over it. I remember hearing. I don't think Gina's at Rometty is. She's no longer CHRO, I believe. But I remember hearing her. She was still in that position a little over a year. It must have been April or maybe April last year. And she was on a panel, and they were talking about the surprises, what was going to what changed, or what caught them off guard. And I remember her saying, and it struck me because here was IBM with all this data and understanding it. They didn't know who. They didn't really have a clear idea of who the essential workers were. When it's like everybody can go home except for the essential workers, or everybody shouldn't report to work except for essential workers. It's like, so who's an essential worker? And again, brought a new term into in the HR world. But now that we are coming back with a vengeance, the economy's hot, stock market's hot, job market's hot. We are dealing with this thing called hybrid workforce. And somehow people think it's remote or it's at work on physical site. And there's, I don't know how many shades of gray between there. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from your client? What's going on your end?
Well, a multitude of different things are. So hybrid work, as you said, very much so has become the new vernacular, and explaining just quite frankly what I think is going to be just the new normal of the way in which we work. We are social animals, so there is a desire to still, I'll say, break bread. I'm used to hopping on planes and going and seeing clients all of the time. I do well, actually, I don't miss the flights, the delays all the time, et cetera, but I missed that opportunity. And so what I think we're going to see is, this mix. And this is what companies are trying to, is I'm working with clients right now, CHROs and other executives of companies, trying to figure out what's the right balance. As you said, there are essential workers. For IBMers, those were things like individuals who needed to sit and reside in data centers, right? We're protecting the infrastructure and the data of other companies, or where we process transactions for financial services clients who wouldn't want that done in someone's home. So you're right, we needed to work through that. And as I'm working with companies like manufacturing, or think contact centers, where it requires being in physical locations depending on the type of work that they're doing or the calls or contacts that they're handling, recognize, that's going to continue to exist in physical workplaces. But the rest, and employees in particular, are looking for, many of whom, and I think, my kids are older, so they could care less whether I'm here at home or not. But for those with toddlers who are walking in behind, we see that on news channels, et cetera, they're looking to go and get out of, these four walls and these square windows that we're staring at. But also, as you mentioned, it's around this balance between productivity yet engagement. It requires a very different type of leadership in terms of how we need to be communicating, keep employees engaged. You think of the design thinking sessions or innovation or creativity, a lot of that done on a whiteboard in a room with all of those juices flowing. So it's much more so around evaluating what's that optimal balance of physical in-person versus remote, and or that hybrid. When do we want to bring people back? Is that 2 days a week? Is that once a month for meetings or key meetings, et cetera?
Right. And I guess, going back again, is people are, it's almost a binary choice. People are looking, it's a binary choice. And if you put it on a slider, 100% remote to 100% at work, the challenge is the slider is going to be constantly moving. It's going to be up and down. This isn't going to be the last challenge we have, but reaching out to top talent, we may have that, but they want to be home 2 days a week. So it's going to be a choice. Do you hire that person because you have this, or not hire them because you have this policy that they have to be there 80% or 100% of the time, or do you make arrangements and then all of a sudden childcare changes, or their spouse's role changes, their job changes, or this week their spouse is traveling and they have to rearrange their childcare. So again, I think if people look at it as this perpetually moving sliding scale of what hybrid means, which drives people crazy, because humans are addicted to certainty. We need to, we need to know. You mentioned something earlier though, and again, I think this fits into that conversation. You said that, well, the data workers, the data center employees were essential. They needed to be on site. But even with involving technology, when that's a security issue, that's a confidentiality issue, that's a privacy issue. But with things like blockchain, will that change that? Will that mean, well, even data center people may not have to be there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and this is what companies are evaluating now, what they once thought were essential to be in the office. I spoke to, it was a large US state head of their technology. I think they have about 15 or 1,600 people. And the way in which they measure their team, their performance, was seeing physical bums and seats. And they asked, well, what if we were to have people some kind of a rolling hybrid environment, et cetera, and how are we going to manage their performance? And I sort of looked through the WebEx screen at them and said, well, how did you measure before? Right. So it's what was essential to be physically in offices has just caused leadership to completely have to rethink that. And to how you were just even opening up the show as well, when you look at, this scarcity for the right kind of talent and the demand for skills, this is where I'm seeing a significant change. There's a much more rapid acceleration around digital transformation, modernizing infrastructures and the cloud environments and the applications they reside upon, number one, and two, automation of work. So what gets left behind, looking at those kind of skills, that's changing. So employers, when they're looking at this optimization of workforce and how is it connected to their business strategy, the conversation becomes much more around the skills that are required for this future of work, and where do we go to get those skills, and therefore that means looking much more broadly at a global economy and workforce to deliver, even for those who might have traditionally only operated in certain physical hubs in certain geographic locations. The scarcity for skills, when you think of we all expect a consumer grade experience sitting at home. The ability to, go on Amazon or similar, electronic shopping carts and do all of our shopping from home in these last 15 or 16 months. Well, that requires a significant amount of investment and type of skills, from a technology perspective. But then you think of the customer service workers who need to service all of these customers. So that's where there's this shift now in getting the right kind of skills. Do you buy that talent? But as you said, there's not necessarily enough of it out there. Are you developing the skills? Are you investing in education? And for the changing propensity of skills, that's the other thing. The shelf life of skills is decreasing rapidly to less than 3 years, 2 years, right? So that's that balance now. And so therefore, getting workers with those skills in the environments in which they want to work is completely changing the way that businesses and leaders need to be thinking about it now.
What are some of the skills that you're seeing are in highest demand?
A significant amount of technical skills right now. So things like CRM skills, Salesforce, one of the hottest skills out there. There's also a migration. I spent a lot of time with CHROs. So you look at the human capital management systems that are out there. They all need to be migrating to the cloud right now. Tax updates, and it's important we all get paid. And so, we're seeing that shift to the cloud. So there's functional technical skills that are required. But what's really interesting is there's also a shift in the soft skills. As we automate more, what gets left behind for workers to do are higher value activities where you need critical thinking skills and the ability to be agile and pivot. And I don't mean agile in the waterfall technical sense, just the ability to adapt and adopt to new processes very quickly. And as leaders, again, operating this kind of environment, there's very different skills that we need in terms of leaders who can engage in a very different way, communicate in a very different way. Employees are also expecting much more transparency in their employers, right? And connectedness to think of what's happened from a social standpoint as well. So connectedness around values, you mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those all are soft skills that are much more amplified than they were in years past.
And so where do we get these? I mean, the Chamber of Commerce just came out Monday, I think, or Tuesday of this week. And, big declaration, we have a shortage of workers. So I'm not sure that was headline news, but they emphasize the importance of that. And, certainly there's an initiative now to improve training. So much of the traditional, BS of, frankly, we need to change education. We need to reskill. We need to upskill. We need more training programs. We need apprenticeship programs. But a lot of those take time. I mean, and as you said, by the time you put a program into place and it's a 2 or 3 year implementation, some of those skills just are no longer needed, or they've changed themselves. So what are you seeing, what's happening now with the kind of the fast retraining, the fast upskilling? What are companies doing? What do we need to do?
What I'm seeing is a multi-pronged approach to that. And there are definitely the long-term ones. As you said, things like looking at IBM, for example, P-Tech schools. This also helps our diversity initiative. So we're going to underrepresented communities, getting kids at, grade 9 and up, trying to get them, interested in technology and building for a future. Again, that's long-term. So short-term, it's this optimization of the workforce. And this is where the HR business partner needs to become much more of the consultant to the business leaders. I go back to skills. What are the skills that you need? And then you look at the data. So actually one of the hottest jobs I'm seeing is actually data scientists around employee data. And so looking at a combination of looking in the rearview mirror, what's worked, who have been our top performers in the past, with what skills have they had. But the next is then the bridge to the propensity to learn. And so what are the types of skills, projects, programs that people have worked on in the past and been successful, and then career paths of others. And then look at the digital footprint as well to see who has the propensity to learn a new skill versus we know that buying it gets more and more expensive, as the, salary costs increase each time there's a hop versus the long tail to educate an existing workforce. So much more around that propensity to learn. And then there's a balance though of contingent workforce and the gig economy. And so it's a balance of all of those things. And it's becoming more and more difficult than it ever was.
Well, I talk, my TED Talk was about VUCA. I've written about VUCA for 15 years. I keep saying it over and over again. I don't know a better acronym for 2020 than VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that is, if there is a new normal, which nobody likes to, again, there is no such thing as normal. We're going back to that. But I talk about next waves of normals. That there's going to be multiple normals. We're each going to experience it a little differently. It could be different for industry, per people, per region. So we're all going to have these different normals happening in different waves. That's scary. It's terrifying. It's also fascinating. I mean, it's, people like you and I and a lot of people at IBM and a lot of consultants that I know are fascinated by, where things are going to go, but it's terrifying if you're an employer. So,
absolutely.
And trying to figure out your business model. I talk a lot in addition to VUCA. I mean, the solution to that, we talk a lot about the soft skills. And I can say every single day I get called by someone say, can we test for work ethic? Can we test for grit? What about resilience? And, we threw out these buzzwords, and that's like, if we have somebody who's resilient, now they'll be a good employee. And they may stick around. They may not quit impulsively, but that doesn't make them quality. In fact, one of my guests next week is David Houle. He has a new book, and his book's called Cognitive Dissonance. And, one of the skills we talk about in the AQ, adaptability quotient, is mental flexibility. And it's the ability to have these multiple thoughts, or to have kind of opposing thoughts, and have them in your head at the same time and make sense of them. That's a skill that obviously a lot of people don't have because we've been again addicted to certainty. What do you? I guess and this falls in line with the skills that we need. But what do you see as the biggest challenge that companies are having in training and getting the people up to speed? Because even with retraining, it's like, so if I complete this course, if I go back to school for 2 years, then I get a job and I get a raise. And we go, no, that's not guaranteed. You have to do it, but we're not guaranteeing anything. What are you saying is the biggest, one of the biggest challenges that I guess employers are facing, even figuring out what do we need to train?
Well, I go back to connecting the skills for the future with business strategy, right? So you think every business has a 1, 3, 5-year business strategy. So it's connecting that back to, again, the skills that are going to be required to deliver the outcomes as part of the business strategy. So, figuring that out, and again, 2, 3 years out, so you have the lead time to build or buy or automate those skills that are required. The next thing would be around the way we look at measuring performance is changing. And you touched on that around flexibility and adaptability and how do you measure for that. And when I think of the way we look at, so many business processes are being automated right now. And as I said earlier, what gets left behind are the higher value type of activities that require the ability to break the rules to deliver an outcome sometimes. Not like with our next guest from our breaking some of the compliance issues, but you think of in a contact center, right? Well, A and B, like this is what the rules I need to follow. Well, they don't always make sense. And so the expectation we have is very, very different. And so for employers, it also means looking at measuring performance very differently. So being incredibly performance and pay, quite frankly. So being really clear that pay is linked to skills, demand for skills. So it's incumbent upon the employees to also be educating themselves and building their skills. They are, however, looking for employers to invest in them as well. And that breeds, in their mind, job security. We know that there isn't really job security, but if you continue to stay current with skills, it keeps you in demand and therefore somewhat secure. And so that's one element of pay. But then also the other pay component is pay for performance. And so being really clear on outcomes that are expected. And some of that comes with flexibility to be problem solvers, to be innovative and creative in delivering solutions in a very different environment. And that also means being iterative, right? Because we're going to go through that. And it's sometimes the adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. But some of those elements, when you say this is the outcome that I want, might initially be not as tangible. So again, that's a very different type of leader who needs to lead in that way and coach and develop. Again, be really transparent with expectations, or I always talk about outcomes that we're expecting for the constituents we serve, whether those are employees, customers, or clients.
And going back to talking about the hybrid workforce. So everybody's struggling with this. We're going to bring some people back. We can't. What's the first thing? I mean, for companies that are in the throes of this, which is almost every company, but especially I work with a lot of small, medium-sized businesses, and this is completely new to them because they always thought they had to watch people literally managing by walking around. You're not going to be able to walk around remotely. What are some of the things that any leader, but small, medium-sized business owners should be doing right now to evaluate to determine what shape or form hybrid takes?
I'd say first and foremost, ask your employees. I'm seeing some companies who are going all in and creating what they, these hubs, innovation hubs, they're reconfiguring offices with a smaller footprint without actually understanding how many of their employees plan on returning to a physical work environment or want to. They can dictate it, but they might not actually.
Novel idea. Ask your employees, right?
Yeah, shocking, right? So I'd say that first and foremost, but then also understand. I mean, what's the business that you're in? What is your business culture? I think of again, if you're innovating and creating products or designs, or you think marketing, et cetera, that there's a lot of that creativity that does happen when we come together. The distraction that comes and sitting behind a Zoom or a WebEx call is not the same. So, the answer is typical consultant speak. It depends. Is the answer, but it really does on what employees want, what's the work product or service that you're delivering, and what's the type of culture and environment you're in. And so that's where I think and then there becomes a blend. Like I think you need to. I think the expectations for employees that employees have are very different. So it's a balance between all of those elements. And so each individual small business owner is going to have to assess that. But again, based upon conversation with their employees, with their customers, and assessing the needs of the work products, services, and outcomes they're expecting.
Yeah, and if the McKinsey study is right, where only 10% of executives feel that they're going to be 80% or more, or that 10% of the workforce is going to be at work 80% of the time, that leaves a lot of shades of gray of going from 100% remote to whatever. So, Victoria, I really appreciate it. We can talk. I can talk to you forever. So, a million more questions I have. Hopefully, you'll come back. And for people who want to reach out to you, people want to learn more from you, how can they do that?
They can find me on my website, which is victoria-pelletier.com, or you can certainly look me up on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Real quick question. We got just a few seconds here. A year from now, I have you back on the air. What are we talking about?
Quite honestly, I think we're going to be talking much more the same. This normal is going to shift. As you said, we want stability, but it doesn't exist. So comfort and change, don't exist. So I think we're going to be having similar conversation.
That's my answer too. So when I ask that, thanks very much. Thank you for being part of Geeks Geezers and Googlization. Please stay safe. We will definitely be in touch. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thanks.
Have a good day. Wow. I again, we talk about the next waves of normals. Or I talk about the next waves of normals, and it's great to get some confirmation that I'm correct. And I want to thank Victoria Pelletier for being our guest and talking about the hybrid workforce. But we've got another great guest coming up, Kia Roberts from Triangle Investigations. She's also the former director of NFL Director of Investigations, if I can get that out right. But first, we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors Ngomu and Success Performance Solutions. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders for less than $1 a day. The Ngomu app will support your employees in a myriad of ways, from career and personal development to health and wellness. No need to schedule and hold trainings. Just have them access over 90 coaches for live virtual group and one-on-one coaching for whatever topic they need or want to work on. Anytime, anywhere. Learn more at ngomu.com today.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks Geezers and Googlization. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you're not a subscriber yet, if you're not a member of Googlization Nation, it is free, and hopefully you will join. You can go to googlizationnation.com, very easy, and you will get weekly updates about podcasts, webinars. We've had a couple webinars going on recently, and they're still available on the replay. We'll be having our new calendar come out in just a few days, which you'll get on Googlization Nation. But please do so. You can catch our replay of my interview last week with Ed Gordon, talking about the labor market meltdown, and that's available up on YouTube. So is my duct tape, or actually on my webinar platform. And you can get to that by going straight to successperformancesolutions.com. You can go to bit.ly/AQAI520. And that's duct tape won't fix your broken candidate experience. And then you can also go to our adaptability webinar, how to grow and thrive in an effed up world. We'll show those again at the end, but appreciate you being here. But right now, we're going to continue the show with our next guest, Kia Roberts. Kia is the founder and principal at Triangle Investigations. She is also the former NFL Director of Investigations, and we're going to be talking about how that plays in on the current hybrid workforce or the new workforce, whether it's hybrid or not. So we want to welcome Kia to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Kia. Nice to meet you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, Ira.
Hey, thanks for being part of that. So you went from the NFL to your own business, investigating misconduct, sexual harassment. Again, a good training ground, I guess. What are some of the warning signs? I mean, what are some of the things that, as I know you heard part of the interview I just had with Victoria, But as companies are evaluating moving to that hybrid workforce, whether it's 100% or 1%,
Right.
what are some of the changes that they need to be aware of? What are some of the policy changes they need to?
So it's absolutely critical that employers continue to do the really good and consistent and substantive work of keeping their finger on the pulse of the employee experience. So employers cannot say, oh, well, people only hear 50% of the time, 25% of the time. It doesn't make a difference, because the fact of the matter is, if an employee can make a substantive argument that they have been on the receiving end of discrimination, retaliation, sexual harassment, and whatnot, that employer now has a legal problem, right? And what's been so fascinating for our team over the last year is the ways in which misconduct appears while people are working remotely. Like, it's still happening. We've had like zero slowdown in terms of our caseloads and investigations, because discrimination, harassment, retaliation, sexual harassment, unfortunately, can all be performed remotely. So it's crucial for employers to really keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on, even when they're not having that day-to-day interaction with employees.
So there's obviously, I won't say obviously, hopefully it's obvious to most people, that there are certain things such as bullying, sexual harassment, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's virtual,
Right.
they're the same. But without sharing, obviously, I know some of these are confidential. I'm sure they can't be shared. What would be some examples of things that you've seen, maybe on the uprise, or companies that need to be more aware of, that may be more likely to happen through a virtual or through a remote or a virtual platform than they would on site?
Right, absolutely. So we had an investigation last summer that I call our uniquely 2020 investigation, in terms of the allegations and what employees were saying was happening. So, for example, there was an African-American woman on the team who said that the manager would make her turn on her camera for meetings to keep an eye on her, but didn't ask the white team members to do so, in a way that to her felt like monitoring an excessive performance review. We've also seen some complaints with managers really not having good boundaries about work versus home now that we're all working remotely. So, managers that expect people to respond to emails very, very late at night or on weekends or early in the morning, because the line between work and home has gotten so blurred. We also had a really interesting investigation where we really started to explore the bounds of what is an employer entitled to know and not know with respect to your health status. So this was pre-vaccine, and this particular employee stated that he got sick with coronavirus pretty early on in the pandemic and had a rough time, but ultimately recovered. But that his manager was asking questions, were you sick? Did you have coronavirus? In a way that felt to him intrusive and possibly violative of his medical privacy. So it's appearing in every way possible, people being rude to each other in Slack messages, in Teams chats, and this person was gesturing in a certain way in the camera. And that made me feel fearful, even though we weren't in the same room. So it's been all across the board, but it's certainly happening.
So we've taken off, we're flying the plane, and we're trying to figure out how to stay in the air and land it, right?
Right.
What are, I guess, some of the things that you mentioned, though, and I've seen this in everything else, including talent acquisition and engagement. People blame working remotely on the reasons, yet many of many of the problems, I want to say challenges, many of the problems, many of the wrongs,
right,
were really evident when everybody was at work. Am I correct? I mean, are you seeing any uniquely new problems, or are these just the same problems in a new venue, new medium?
They're the same problems showing up in a new medium. That's a very good way of putting it. But employers and, many of our clients are really, really, really fearful of the blowback that can come without really knowing what's going on and addressing it correctly, right? So I was watching TV and someone said this, and I stole this line because I thought it was so good. They said, with the rise of social media, what we're really starting to see is a democratization of the microphone. which is so good. So if I'm at work and I am from historically underrepresented minority and I feel like I'm being treated this way at work, I don't have to go get an employment lawyer anymore. I don't have to go get a public relations person. I can just take to Twitter, or I can go on Facebook, and maybe some employees will join me. And a lot of organizations right now are living in that perpetual fear of the other shoe dropping, right? Like, is everything okay? We don't want to learn about it via social media. We don't want to learn about it via an investigative report in the New York Times. And we certainly don't want to learn about it once we get a demand letter from a lawyer, right? So everyone's having to think through these really new and creative ways of creating reporting processes and mechanisms for properly assessing the employee experience at any given time.
It's so interesting. You talk about the democratization, and so last year, social media is everybody sort of knows what it is, but here we had Zoom, and the reality is that if you look, all of a sudden there was no C-suite, right, and there was no cubicles. Everybody had an equal picture. Everybody and Zoom. Or any platform that displayed everybody's face on the screen, basically democratized. There was no longer walking into a mahogany, office with a huge desk that separated us. We were all just faces on a screen.
Yeah.
And some companies learned to take advantage of that, and other companies continue to be challenged to that because they liked that hierarchy, they liked that protection. There was also the opportunities to see the CEO who used to say, well, if they work at home, they're going to be distracted. And all of a sudden the CEO at home, the doorbell's ringing, the delivery guy's there, the plumber's there, the grandkids are there, the cat jumps up on the desk. And it's like, okay, now so again, everybody became human, and it was a real opportunity to become, more transparent. What can a company do? I mean, here we are. I mean, we have a few minutes left. What are some things companies can do? And I guess it's twofold. What can they do to prevent calling you? And the second is when should they call you?
Right. So with respect to the first question, what can they do to prevent calling you? One of the best things organizations can do for themselves just out of the bat is get a really solid, good code of conduct outlining exactly what is acceptable with respect to employees' behavior. So that code of conduct serves as a guardrail, right? Saying these are the parameters for your employee experience and behavior. But then it also serves as a very effective risk management tool where, God forbid, a few years down the line, someone does file a lawsuit, you can say, we had this code of conduct in place. Employees were told that this is what was expected of them. So that's the first thing you can do to prevent calling me, kind of get that code of conduct behavior structure in place first.
Now, do you help? I just want to interrupt you a second. Do you help people develop that, or is there a good source you can send people to? And again, it shouldn't be a copy and paste. I assume that's
right.
Right.
So no, we can help organizations write and craft their codes of conduct. We can do that in any way that the employer would like it done. We can do a listening session with your team. We can do an analysis of your misconduct stats and really kind of identify problem points and pain points within the employee experience. And we work together in lockstep to write that code of conduct. While you brought that up, we can be found at triangleinvestigations.com. And if you mention this show, you do get a price of 50% off your code of conduct. We call it the most inexpensive insurance policy you will ever have with respect to that code of conduct. And then with respect to, when you do call us, what are we working through? So we are giving you, we can either perform an investigation because something has happened, like a very general misconduct investigation, digging into specific allegations, or we can help you build out an entire accountability structure. So that's the creation of your code of conduct, creating reporting processes and mechanisms for people to report misconduct, and then walk through what a consistent and thorough investigation should look like and how the parties involved in the investigation are ultimately informed of the outcome of it. And we walk you through that end to end. And then we leave and you have a wonderful thing that hopefully stops you from being sued in the future. That's my lawyer hat coming on with the risk management perspective, trying to protect our clients in that way.
So what happens when that also doesn't? I mean, it's not 100% foolproof. So you got the code of conduct, you did the training, everybody's aware of it, but people are still going to violate it. We're still dealing with human beings. Goes off the rails. What are when should somebody call you?
So if you have a specific incident that someone has already alleged, saying that they've been a victim or on the receiving end of or witnessed misconduct, call us then. But if you have any questions at all, any holes that you're starting to kind of perceive within, is your code of conduct tight enough? Are people really reporting misconduct? That's become a huge issue, right? So, a lot of organizations know that there's things going on. How are people reporting it? Are things bubbling up to the level of management where it needs to go for it to be correctly addressed, right? So there's really, really spending a lot of time figuring that out, and we can do a complete analysis with you of where your weak spots are and work with you to create really good, strong risk management focused solutions.
I mean, you bring up a great point there is just because you don't hear it, it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yes.
So how, and obviously surveying your employees is one thing, but what are some ways you can recommend that people can, find out? I mean, if it's quiet, it's either good news or it's just waiting to simmer over.
Absolutely.
How could a company, what could a company do to find out if it's really quiet?
Right. So our organization has an app that we've developed. It's called Telly. It's available on Google Play and the App Store. And that works as a reporting mechanism for employees to report misconduct within their organization. They make the report on the app. Within 24 hours of having received the submission, we've made contact with the reporting party. Within 72 hours of having received the submission, we provide the client with an investigative roadmap, and we do the investigation from there. So that has been kind of a hot ticket item over the last year. This was actually developed pre-pandemic and has turned out to be especially useful over the last year. When there's no HR door to go knock on, which there has not been for the last year for the majority of employees, you still want to keep an understanding of what's going on. So that's an example. And then there are hotlines, and then there are designated people within the organization that we're saying, we know we're all working remotely, but if something happens, this is the designated person that we'd like you to be in touch with, so that organizations can really wrap their arms around what's going on.
Excellent. So you already gave the website, but we'll do it again. If you heard the last, I try to wrap up each guest's appearance with this question: is 12 months from now, I'd love to have you back, hear what's going on. What are we going to be talking about?
12 months from now, we are going to be talking about employers implementing very new, creative, and unique solutions for keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on with employees from a misconduct perspective while employees work in a hybrid or remote situation. The liability for the company is exactly the same, whether you're seated in a cubicle or whether you're at home. When people are engaging in misconduct, that's violative of labor laws.
Yeah, excellent. And I agree with you. I assume we're, as most of my guests say, we're going to be talking much about the same things, just a little bit more complex, a little bit more advanced, maybe a little bit more ambiguous on how to approach this. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Kia.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, just what you talk about. We talk a lot about talent acquisition, employee experience, candidate experience, diversity, inclusion, and technology. All of this is so. I don't know how we achieve any of that. How do you improve your brand if you don't have if people don't feel psychologically safe? How do you improve diversity, inclusion? How do you reach diversity or reach inclusion? I can't say diversity, but inclusion if we don't have that. So such a vital role, and something that I'm not sure a lot of people thought about until now. So thanks very much for sharing that. Thank
you again for having me, Ira. I really appreciate it.
Okay. And Triangle Investigations, you can reach Kia.
Yep. TriangleInvestigations.com. Thank you so much again.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. And here we are at the end of another Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Thank everybody for being part of it. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you'd like to get updates on future shows like this, our guests, and also some webinars that we've had and are coming up, please subscribe to Googlization Nation. And again, you'll get mostly weekly update, very, very occasionally. If there's something hot off the press, I'll send you another one. And every now and then you'll get a break from us, but essentially weekly you'll hear from us and get updates, and stay tuned, whether we're talking about talent acquisition, employee engagement, candidate experience, diversity, inclusion, and we have great guests like we did today, Victoria Pelletier, IBM VP, North American leader for transformation and talent, talking about the hybrid workforce, and also Kia Roberts from Triangle Investigations. You can reach both of them. Please share the show with your friends, your colleagues. Hopefully you found it worthwhile. Also, if you're interested on replays, or you can't make our live TV, the live streaming each week, we are available on almost every podcast platform you can think of: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, we're there. And really, again, appreciate you being here. Thank you again, Ngomu and Success for Performance Solutions, for being part of the show, for allowing us to be here, for being our sponsor. And until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.